What if the very first words you speak each morning could quietly reshape your entire life? Not a motivational shout. Not a forced smile in the mirror. But 5 ancient truths, carried across centuries by Buddhist monks who understood the human mind more deeply than any modern scientist ever could. The Buddha said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." And yet, most of us wake up each morning and immediately surrender our minds to worry, comparison, and noise, before we have even taken our first conscious breath. What if you stopped doing that? What if instead, you planted 5 seeds of wisdom before the chaos begins? Today, we explore 5 powerful things you should tell yourself every morning. The 5th one may quietly change everything. The Buddha's teaching on thoughts and true self. I am not my thoughts, I am the silence beneath them. Deep in the mountains of ancient China, a Zen master named Huineng lived a remarkably simple life. He was not born into wealth or scholarship. He was an illiterate woodcutter who one day heard a single line from the Diamond Sutra being recited at a market stall, and in that moment, something within him cracked wide open. Years later, after becoming one of the most revered Zen patriarchs in history, Huineng was approached by a monk who was in great distress. The monk said, "Master, my mind will not be still. Thoughts torment me day and night. I cannot escape them. Please, teach me how to silence my mind." Huineng looked at him steadily and said, "Show me this mind that torments you, and I will silence it for you." The monk paused. He searched. He looked inward, deeply, honestly, desperately. And after a long silence, he said, I cannot find it." Huineng smiled softly. "There. I have already silenced it for you." The monk's eyes widened, not because his thoughts stopped, but because he suddenly realized something earth-shaking. The mind that he believed was tormenting him had no solid, permanent existence. Thoughts arose, lingered briefly, and dissolved, like ripples on water, like breath on a cold winter morning. They appeared real. They felt overwhelmed. But they were not him. He was the space in which those thoughts appeared and disappeared. He was the silence beneath the noise. Now bring this ancient moment into a modern living room. A young man named Ethan lies awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. His mind is a courtroom, and he is simultaneously the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, and the accused. Every mistake he has ever made is being replayed in merciless detail. Every embarrassing moment. Every word he wishes he could take back. His thoughts tell him he is not smart enough. Not successful enough. Not worthy of the love he receives. And because he has never learned to separate himself from his thoughts, he believes every single verdict. For Ethan, his thoughts are not just thoughts. They are true. They are identity. They are prison walls made of invisible iron. Then one evening, a friend gives him a small book of Buddhist teachings. He opens it randomly to a page that contains a single line, "You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them." Something about that sentence refuses to leave him alone. It follows him into the shower. It sits with him during lunch. It whispers to him as he drives home from work. He begins experimenting, cautiously, clumsily at first. When a self-critical thought arises, instead of believing it immediately, he pauses and says quietly, "There is a thought. It says I am not enough. But I am not this. I am the one noticing it. It feels strange. Almost silly. But over days and weeks, something begins to shift. The thoughts still come, they always will, but their grip loosens. Their volume decreases. They become like passing cars on a distant highway, present but no longer in control of their direction. The Dhammapada tells us, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. When you begin each morning by telling yourself, I am not my thoughts, I am the silence beneath them, you are performing a revolutionary act of self-liberation. You are stepping back from the noisy theater of the mind and taking your seat as the observer, calm, spacious, free. You are not deleting your thoughts. You are simply remembering that you were never defined by them. You are the sky. The thoughts are only weather. And weather, no matter how fierce, always passes. Discovering your Buddha nature, everything I need already exists within me. There is a story told in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries that has been passed down for generations. A beggar lived outside the gates of a great city. Every day, he sat on the same flat stone, holding out his hands to passers-by, pleading for coins, for food, for any small mercy the world might offer. He lived this way for 30 years. 30 years of hunger, cold, and the quiet desperation of a man who believed that life had given him nothing. When the beggar finally passed from this world, the people of the city decided to move the stone he had sat upon for so long. And beneath it, buried just inches below the surface, they discovered a chest filled with gold and precious gems. The beggar had spent his entire life sitting on top of his own treasure, begging for scraps from strangers, never once thinking to look beneath him. Pause with that image for a moment. How many of us are living exactly like that beggar, sitting on top of our own inner wealth while desperately seeking fulfillment from the outside world? Consider a woman named Priya. She is talented, compassionate, deeply intelligent, yet she has spent most of her adult life seeking approval from others as though it were oxygen. Every decision she makes passes through an invisible committee in her mind. What will her parents think? What will her colleagues say? Will this make people respect her? Will that make them love her more? She has outsourced her sense of worth to the world, and the world, as it always does, gives inconsistent and unreliable answers. Some days she feels valued. Other days, she feels invisible. Her self-worth rises and falls like a leaf in an unpredictable wind. Then, during a particularly difficult period, a time when every external source of validation seemed to collapse at once, Priya stumbles upon a Buddhist meditation retreat. Not because she is seeking enlightenment, but simply because she is exhausted and has nowhere else to turn. During a guided meditation, the teacher says something that pierces straight through her defenses. You have been searching your entire life for something that has never been lost. The peace you are looking for is looking through your eyes right now. Those words land in her chest like a stone dropping into still water. Ripples spread outward and reach every corner of her being. She begins to understand, not just intellectually, but in her bones, that she is not an empty vessel waiting to be filled by the world. She is a wellspring. She is a deep, living reservoir of wisdom, strength, compassion, and clarity that no external circumstance can drain. The Buddha taught with unwavering certainty, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. This is the doctrine of Buddha nature, the radical, beautiful idea that every sentient being already contains within themselves the seed of complete awakening. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to achieve some distant milestone before you are allowed to feel whole. Wholeness is your birthright. It is woven into the very fabric of your being. When you tell yourself each morning, everything I need already exists within me, you are not practicing self-deception. You are practicing self-remembrance. You are turning your gaze inward, toward the treasure that has been waiting patiently beneath you all along. Stop begging the world for what you already possess. Look within. The gold is there. If this journey is resonating with your heart, take a moment to subscribe to Buddha Coha and turn on notifications so these teachings can greet you whenever you need them most. A simple click can become the beginning of a beautiful, mindful path. Now, let us continue to the next truth. How the Buddha mastered emotional peace. Nothing outside me has the power to disturb my peace. In the ancient texts, there is a remarkable account of the night the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, determined to reach full awakening. As he sat in deep meditation, Mara, the embodiment of temptation, fear, and delusion, arrived with an army designed to shatter the Buddha's resolve. Mara sent fierce storms of wind and rain. He sent arrows of fire. He sent visions of terrifying demons with contorted faces and blood-curdling screams. But something extraordinary happened. As each arrow flew toward the Buddha, it transformed midair into a flower petal and fell gently at his feet. The storms raged around him, but could not touch the stillness within him. The demons roared, but their voices could not penetrate the fortress of his awareness. Mara was bewildered. Nothing worked. No weapon, no threat, no temptation could reach the man sitting quietly beneath that tree. Finally, in desperation, Mara challenged the Buddha's very right to sit there. Who are you to claim this seat of awakening? What witness do you have? The Buddha simply reached down and touched the earth with his fingertips. The earth itself is my witness, he said. And Mara, all his armies, all his fury, all his illusions, vanished like morning mist before the rising sun. This is not just a mythological story. It is a blueprint for how to live. Think about a man named Raphael. He works in a high-pressure environment where criticism is constant, deadlines are ruthless, and his supervisor seems to take a particular pleasure in publicly pointing out mistakes. Every harsh word feels like one of Mara's arrows, sharp, aimed at his center, designed to destroy. For years, Raphael absorbed every arrow. He took every criticism personally. He let his supervisor's moods dictate his own emotional weather. On days when his boss was pleased, Raphael felt worthy. On days when his boss was cold or cutting, Raphael felt worthless. He had given his inner peace away completely, handed it to someone who did not even know they held it. One weekend, while walking through a park in early autumn, Raphael noticed something. The leaves were falling from the trees, golden, red, orange, drifting slowly downward without resistance. The trees were not fighting the wind. They were not clutching their leaves desperately. They were simply allowing what needed to fall, standing firm in their roots while releasing what no longer served them. In that moment, he understood something that changed everything. He was not the leaves. He was the tree. And no wind, no matter how harsh, could uproot him unless he allowed it. He began his mornings differently after that. Before stepping into the chaos of his workplace, he would close his eyes, take 3 conscious breaths, and say firmly but gently, "Nothing outside me has the power to disturb my peace." Not every day was easy. Some arrows still stung. But gradually, he developed what Buddhist practitioners call equanimity, the ability to remain steady and centered regardless of what swirls around him. He stopped being a mirror that reflected every external disturbance and became a mountain, solid, grounded, unmoved by passing weather. Shantideva, the great Buddhist philosopher, wrote, "Where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? But wearing leather on the soles of my feet is equivalent to covering the earth with it." You cannot control the world. You cannot stop people from being unkind, unreasonable, or unfair. But you can protect your own feet. You can build an inner foundation so strong, so rooted in awareness, that external chaos becomes background noise rather than the soundtrack of your life. Your peace was never meant to be conditional. It was never meant to depend on whether the world treats you gently today. It was meant to be yours, unshakable, unconditional, and always accessible. Claim it every morning. Guard it gently. And remember, no storm outside can extinguish the flame that burns steadily within. The Zen secret to living in the present moment. Today I choose presence over pressure. A student once approached the great Zen master Ikkyu and asked, "Master, will you write for me some maxims of the highest wisdom?" Ikkyu picked up his brush and wrote a single word, attention. The student was puzzled. "Is that all? Won't you add something more?" Ikkyu wrote again, attention. Attention. The student grew frustrated. "I don't see much depth or subtlety in what you have written." Ikkyu picked up his brush one final time and wrote, attention. 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 The student demanded, "What does this word, attention, mean anyway?" Ikkyu replied simply, "Attention means attention." This deceptively simple teaching contains the entirety of Zen practice within it. Attention, true, full, undivided attention to this moment, is not just a technique. It is the doorway to being fully alive. Yet how rarely we walk through that doorway. Consider a woman named Lena. She is a mother of 3, a dedicated employee, and an endlessly reliable friend, the person everyone calls when they need help. Her days are a blur of obligations, schedules, and other people's needs. She moves through life at a sprint, constantly racing toward the next task, the next deadline, the next crisis. But one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, something unexpected stops her in her tracks. She is rushing through the kitchen, mentally composing an email, physically preparing dinner, and emotionally processing a disagreement she had with her sister that morning, when her youngest child tugs at her sleeve and holds up a crayon drawing. "Mama, look. I drew our family." Lena glances at it for half a second. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she says automatically, without really seeing it. Her daughter's face falls, just slightly, just for a moment. But Lena catches it. And in that brief flash of a child's disappointment, she sees the entire cost of her constant rush reflected at her like lightning illuminating a dark landscape. She is running so fast that she is running past her own life. That evening, after the children are asleep, Lena sits alone in the quiet kitchen and makes a decision that requires no grand gesture, only a shift in intention. She writes 5 words on a small piece of paper and tapes it to her bathroom mirror, where she will see it every morning. "Today I choose presence over pressure." The changes begin small. She puts her phone in another room during dinner. She looks into her children's eyes when they speak to her, not at the clock above their heads. She allows herself to walk slowly through the grocery store without mentally rearranging her to-do list. She takes one deep breath before answering the phone. And slowly, color returns to her world. Sounds become richer. Moments become fuller. Life, which had been rushing past her in a gray, indistinguishable blur, begins to reveal its hidden textures, its quiet miracles, its astonishing ordinariness that turns out to be not ordinary at all. Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Zen master, taught, "The present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. Not if you are productive. Not if you are efficient. If you are attentive." The pressure to do more, achieve more, become more is perhaps the defining affliction of our modern age. We have been taught that our worth is measured by our output, that busyness equals importance, that rest equals laziness, that pausing equals falling behind. But the Buddha taught the opposite. He taught that stillness is strength. That awareness is the highest achievement. That being fully present for a single breath is worth more than 1,000 tasks completed in distraction. When you choose presence over pressure, you are not abandoning your responsibilities. You are transforming your relationship with them. You are moving from frantic doing to conscious being, and in that shift, you discover something remarkable. Everything gets done. But now, you are actually there for it. Please take a moment to share this video with someone who lives under constant pressure and has forgotten the beauty of slowing down. Subscribe to Buddha Coha and join a growing community of mindful souls who are choosing peace over perfection every single day. Let us now explore the final truth, one that holds the deepest power of all. The Buddhist art of letting go and trusting life. I am letting go so life can flow. In a forest monastery in Thailand, a teacher once held up a beautiful ceramic cup during a teaching. It was hand-painted, delicate, and clearly precious. He said to his students, "To me, this cup is already broken." The students looked at each other in confusion. The cup was whole. It was perfect. There was not a single crack. The teacher continued, "I enjoy this cup. I drink my tea from it every morning. I appreciate its beauty, its weight in my hands, the warmth it holds. But in my heart, I have already accepted that one day it will fall, or chip, or shatter. And because I have accepted its impermanence, because I have already let it go, I am free to enjoy it completely, without fear, without clinging, without the suffering that comes from pretending it will last forever." He set the cup down gently. "This is how I hold everything in my life. My health. My relationships. This monastery. Even this body. I hold them all with open hands. And because I hold them loosely, I can love them fully." This teaching strikes at the deepest root of human suffering, our desperate, white-knuckled grip on things we believe we cannot live without. Consider a man named Thomas. For 15 years, he built a business from nothing. It was his identity, his pride, his reason for getting out of bed each morning. Every late night, every sacrifice, every missed holiday was justified by the belief that this business was the ultimate expression of who he was. Then the economy shifted. Markets collapsed. Clients disappeared. And despite every effort, every strategy, every sleepless night of problem solving, the business failed. Thomas did not just lose a company. He lost himself, or at least, the version of himself he had mistaken for his true identity. For months, he sat in the wreckage of what had been, unable to move forward, unable to imagine a future that did not include the one thing he had built his entire sense of self around. A friend, someone who had walked through her own devastating loss years earlier, sat with him one afternoon and said something that at first sounded impossibly simple but later proved impossibly wise. She said, "Thomas, the river cannot flow if you build a dam across it. What you are holding on to is the dam. The river is your life, and it is waiting, patiently, gracefully, for you to let it move again." He did not let go all at once. Nobody does. Letting go is not a single moment of dramatic release. It is 1,000 tiny choices made in the quiet spaces of ordinary days. It is choosing not to reread old business plans at midnight. He is allowing himself to explore a new interest without guilt. It is sitting with the grief instead of running from it, breathing through it, feeling it fully, and then gently, setting it down. Months later, Thomas found himself volunteering at a community center, something he never would have imagined doing during his years of relentless ambition. He was teaching basic financial skills to young people from difficult backgrounds. And standing in front of those eager, uncertain faces, he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. Real purpose. Not built on profit margins or market share, but on connection, contribution, and the simple human joy of helping someone else find their footing. His old business did not fail, so this could happen. Life is not that neatly scripted. But by letting go of what was, by removing the dam, he allowed the river to carry him somewhere he never could have planned but was exactly where he needed to be. The Buddha taught, you only lose what you cling to. Attachment is not love. Attachment is fear wearing the mask of love. True love, for a person, a dream, a phase of life, holds with open hands. It appreciates without possessing. It cherishes without clutching. It says, I am grateful for what was, I am present with what is, and I am open to what will be. When you tell yourself each morning, I am letting go so life can flow, you are not practicing resignation. You are practicing the highest form of courage, the courage to trust that life, in its infinite wisdom, knows the way forward even when you cannot see it. You are stepping into the current instead of fighting against it. You are choosing fluidity over rigidity, openness over control, freedom over fear. And in that surrender, you will discover something the Buddha promised long ago, that on the other side of letting go is not emptiness. It is everything. How 5 Buddhist truths can transform your morning routine and your life. Let us gather these 5 truths together now, like 5 candles placed in a circle, each one illuminating a different corner of the room, and together, filling the entire space with warm, steady light. I am not my thoughts. I am the silence beneath them. Everything I need already exists within me. Nothing outside me can disturb my peace. Today, I choose presence over pressure. I am letting go so life can flow. These 5 sentences are small enough to whisper in 60 seconds. But lived with sincerity, they are vast enough to reshape an entire lifetime. They will not remove your challenges. The Buddha never promised a life without difficulty. What he promised was a way through difficulty, a path illuminated by awareness, compassion, and the unshakable understanding that you are far more than your circumstances. Tomorrow morning, before the world rushes in with its noise and demands, give yourself the gift of these 5 truths. Sit quietly. Breathe deeply. Place your hand over your heart and feel the steady rhythm that has been faithfully beating since before you spoke your first word, since before you carried your first worry. That heartbeat is proof that life wants you here. That you matter. That you belong. The Buddha said, each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most. So be born gently tomorrow. Be born into stillness. Be born into awareness. And carry these 5 truths with you, not as burdens, but as blessings, as quiet companions that walk beside you through every moment of your beautifully imperfect, endlessly precious human life. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for choosing wisdom over noise, depth over distraction, peace over pressure. If these words have touched something within you, please subscribe to Buddha Coha, share this video with someone whose morning could use a little more gentleness, and leave a comment below telling us which of these 5 truths spoke most deeply to your heart. Your words may be the exact message someone else needs to read today. Until we meet again on this path, may you wake in peace, walk in awareness, and rest in the knowledge that you are already, and have always been, enough.